What's up guys, today we're diving into Lightroom. We're going to edit a portrait photo. We're going to give it that nice faded look that's so popular on Instagram and just in general. I personally really love it. I do it for a lot of my portraits. Let's get involved, let's dive in. It's Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, where each and every Tuesday, we bring you a brand new, fresh photography tutorial. This week, like I mentioned in the intro, we're diving into Lightroom. We're using Lightroom Classic. We're going to edit a portrait photo. I've not done anything to it, so we're going to do global edits, local edits with things like the adjustment brush, and then of course we're going to give it that nice stylized, faded look. Let's dive in. This is the photo that we're going to use. We're going to do, like I say, start off with the global adjustments, then do some local adjustments, and then finally give it that kind of stylized, faded look. So let's start off by adding a little bit of contrast, not too much, and we can always come back and adjust these a little bit later as well. Let's bring the highlights down and the shadows up, your classic kind of stuff you might do when you start with this kind of stuff. I want to bring the texture and the clarity up just a touch. Now, I don't want to do that too much, especially the portrait, because to be honest, with portraits, I often like to bring them down a little bit because it can be quite flattering. It softens the skin a little bit without kind of removing the texture of the skin. And it can be quite a flattering look, especially if you want to do a little bit of kind of getting rid of blemishes, but without loads of heavy Photoshop work. It's a great way of softening things out. In this situation though, we're just going to bring it up just a touch. Then we might come back to it again, and the vibrance up a little bit as well. Overall, I think the image probably could do with being brightened a little bit. Let's bring it up to something like that and maybe bring those highlights down a little bit more. I'm pretty happy with how we've kind of adjusted the tone of it there with the exposure. Let's leave the curves for now, but we are definitely going to come back to that. It's a big part of what we're doing. And first of all, let's deal with the color. So I want to bring the oranges down just a touch, just to make them kind of a little bit deeper. The yellows I do want to bring down. I really want to kind of bring the colors towards the same area if I can. The greens as well, let's bring that towards the kind of yellows. And then the blues, I'm just going to move a little bit into the teal kind of area of things. Not too much, but just a touch, just enough. Let's leave the color grading as well for now. We can always come back and add that in towards the end as well. I like to get the photo to kind of where I want it to be before I go for whatever style I'm going to apply to it. We're going to come down here, I'm going to leave all of this for now, and I think I'm going to add a little bit of a vignette, not too much, but just a touch. Let's come down to the calibration. Let's bring the red primary, the hue here, towards the kind of orange, and the blue primary down here towards the sort of teal. I like the look of that, and I like where we are so far with what we've done. We can press the backslash key at any time to see it before and then after, or we can use Y to see a side-by-side before and after. So not a massive difference, but certainly a nice kind of initial edit to the photo. So next I want to just adjust some of the lighting on our model here. So I'm going to come up here to a radial filter, and this is something I do for most portraits. I'm going to double click effect here to reset all of the effects for this radial filter. And let's just make a nice circle over her face there. I'm going to click invert so that now we're going to be affecting everything inside the circle. I'm going to bring the exposure up just a touch, something like that. I'm going to click new, draw another circle. Let's double click effect to make sure everything is set to 0. This time we're going to leave invert not ticked. So we're going to be affecting everything outside of the circle. And I'm going to bring the exposure down, not too much, but just enough to really make her face probably one of the brighter areas of the photo. And I want to do that because I want to make sure that's the focal point of this image. You know, because it's a little bit of a wider portrait, it's a full body portrait. I want to make sure the face is the focal point there. Next, let's grab the adjustment brush. Let's double click effect again, just to make sure everything's set to 0. Let's just bring the exposure up a touch, and let's, with a relatively small brush, and you can affect the size of the brush using the scroll wheel on your mouse, we're going to paint onto her face a little bit. We're going to do kind of some very basic dodging and burning to brighten certain areas and darken certain other areas. Let's just bring the flow down a little bit here to something like 70. That's going to mean that we're building up how we're painting it on. We're not painting it on at full strength, but we can build up as we paint over. And I'm going to begin by just painting down this side of her face here. And then let's just make this a little bit bigger and paint down this side of her body. And I already think that looks pretty good. Let's just make sure we're getting those eyes. So let's just make sure we're painting Let's pop it on both eyes. I think that's gonna look pretty good. Let's click new up here to create a new adjustment brush that we're gonna use. Again, let's double click effect just to set everything to 0. This time let's bring the exposure down. Again, not too much. And a relatively small brush, we're just gonna brush in here just to really kind of accentuate the light and the darkness falling on her face. Now you can see how this particular stuff that you've been doing has affected the photo by turning on and off all the adjustment brushes in the photo. In this case, we've just got the 2, right? Indicated by these 2 little circles. We can come down here to the bottom of the adjustment brush effects and sliders, and we can just click this little toggle here. So let's switch it off and switch it back on. A relatively subtle difference, but I think actually it makes a pretty good difference to things there. Now we can always come back and adjust things. I can bring down this exposure even further. If I click on this circle, I can bring up that exposure a little bit if I want to. Let's turn that off and on. So that's off and that's on. I think that looks really good. So let's stick with that. I think we've made a good difference, especially to her face there. So let's look at the entire before and after. So again, the backslash key on the keyboards. This was before and this is after. I actually really like the edit just as it is here. We could also, if we like, we could bring in another filter. So in this case, let's bring a graduated filter in. Bring that in from the top right. Make sure we've double clicked effects so we don't have any settings that we don't want. And then just bring the exposure up and the dehaze down a little bit. It's going to create the effect of kind of sunlight on our photo. Now I think in this case that might be a little bit too much. Let's click done. And we can always actually bring this exposure of the overall photo down a little bit. Let's do that. I think that looks pretty good. Now I like where we are with this photo. This was before, this was after. Look how much of a difference there is on her face in particular. We've made a big difference here. But we want to go for that kind of faded look. So what we're going to do, we're going to use the tone curve to do this. Now we're going to start off, we've got a very straight tone curve here. This is just on the actual kind of white part of things. We're not adjusting the red, green and blue channels individually. We're just going on for the overall tone curve. Let's actually just bring one point in the middle and let's just bring it down a touch. Let's grab another point about here. So you can just click to add a point onto this curve and you can move these around, and you're going to get really crazy looking stuff if you move them like that. But what we want to do is we want to have one kind of in the middle, maybe down a touch, one in the kind of shadows here. And this point right at the bottom here, bottom left corner, that's the actual black point of the image. So that's how dark is black. What's the darkest part of the image? How dark is black in this image? And what we're going to do is we're going to raise that up. Now, if we were to raise that all the way to the top, then black in this image becomes white. White is right at the top and black is right at the bottom. So we obviously don't want to do that. We want to raise the black point up. Pretty much I want to raise it in line with some of these shadow parts. And you can see as I've done that, it's really faded out a lot of this black because that black becomes more like a gray. So we get this really kind of nice faded look. Now we could always then play around a little bit with the tone curve, maybe even bring the shadows up a little bit if you want a little bit more definition in some of that. And if I turn the tone curve on and off, which I can do with this toggle here, that was before and that's after. What a huge difference that's made to the look of the photo, you know, to the actual style of it. With it off, I actually still think it looks really nice, but obviously you've got way more contrast, which might be your style. But when we turn it on, we've really taken away some contrast, added this kind of faded look. If I press L and then L again, you can see it just completely by itself. I think it looks really nice. I think it's a really effective way of kind of editing these photos with a slightly different look. And let's look at the before and after. So this was before we did anything, and this is after. Let's look side by side. That's a huge difference. That's a huge difference in this photo. Now for me, I love editing photos like this. I love trying out different things and getting different looks. Editing is one of my favorite parts of the whole photographic process, which I know for some people it sounds crazy, but I love it. I love editing photos. But I'd love to hear, what would you like to see in another Tutorial Tuesday, whether it's Lightroom, Capture One, something to do with editing, or would you like to see more photography, kind of practical stuff? Let me know down in the comments. Let me know your thoughts about this as well. Is this style for you? Don't forget to like and subscribe as well if you enjoyed the video. Ooh, that really helps me out. Full list of kit down in the description so you can check that out. And all that's left for me to say is, as always, thanks for watching.